Welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over table pagination. I'm currently in the app builder. In the previous video, I introduced tables. We built this nice table using some static data from the random data API service over here. We've mapped this data into our app data to the list, to the user list field. We just copied and pasted it. We then mapped our table. We went over a lot of concepts about table columns, resizing, hiding, displaying, and all that good stuff. If you haven't watched that video, please go watch it, the table introduction video. All right, so in this video, we're going to be going over the table pagination, static pagination. All right, so we have a static table. What I mean by static is that it is binded to some static data, right? By default with tables, our pagination is set to true. So in this case, we have pagination set to true. If I were to, let's say, set pagination to false, right? Then we have a scenario where we just have one very massive table that displays all the records, right? So we don't necessarily want that. So because we don't want that, we go ahead and we set pagination to true, all right? So that's, just one of the quirks of tables, right? If you don't set it to true, then it just shows all the data. If you set it to true, then you get that paginated effect. So in this case, we're saying pagination is true, use pagination true. We are not using server-side pagination because we're dealing with some static data. Server-side pagination would be binding our table to, let's say, a function or an event that queries a database or some external data source. And we're going to cover that in a separate video from this one. But here we're dealing with some static data, so we're not going to set this to true. We have a display limit of 10. We could change this value, right? And whatever value exists whenever the table loads is what the value of the page size is going to be. So we have a field here called table pagination metadata field. So this is, going to be used when we're dealing with server-side pagination. So this field in our app data is going to house our pagination metadata, things like the page size, the page index, the skip counts, the limit counts. So your standard pagination metadata. We have the total data row count. So this is the total number of rows from, let's say, a query that we've done, right? And again, this is only valid, or it only comes into play whenever we're dealing with server-side pagination, right? So right now the system just ignores it because we're not dealing with server-side pagination. So for example, if let's say this resolved to 100 and we had the display limit of 10, then it would have 10 pages, right? 10 pages of 10. And if this were like 200, right? And we had a display limit of 5, then it'll be 400 pages. That's kind of just how it works. So the system uses these numbers internally to basically determine or calculate our pagination logic or our pagination state. All right. Link pagination to router. This is similar to what we've done in list, what we've covered in when we're dealing with list. We're just, simply linking the pagination to the router. So if I set this to true, all right, then this field, right, will be displayed in our router, right, whenever we play around with the pagination. So I'm just going to go ahead and change this. So I'm just going to call this user page or user table page index, random name. All right. So now if I were to, let's say, go to page 2, now we see in our router, user table page index is 2. Let's just go ahead and save this and refresh the page. All right. So now it loads into page 2. All right. So this is, very, very useful when you have an application and you might want to maybe share some links, right? And you want, whenever you share a link or whatever, that the page loads in maybe a desired state, maybe page 2, page 3, whatever the case may be. You can connect the pagination to the router and the system would look and do all the internal gymnastics to get you to where you want to be. All right. So let's just go back into our table. All right. And we have a bunch of scroll properties that are not required. We're not going to use here because, again, this is just static pagination. All right. Then we have your standard HTML attributes, title and draggable. And then we've gone over is non-reactive. This, when set to true, makes this table not react to data changes. And for dynamic tables, it's probably safe to leave this as false. All right. And here we have our display limit options. So these are the options that we see over here. If we go ahead and make changes to it, let's just add another one. So we have 5, 10, 20, and 50. Let's say I wanted to add 30. Okay. Just going to go ahead and add 30. Change this. Let me just blow this up real quick. All right. So I have it right here. I'm going to change this to a number and just say 30. And that's it. I've added 30. So if I were to go ahead and close this out and go over here to my display limit selector, now I have 30. All right. So this is just one way to edit the selectors. Just keep that in mind. It's really that simple. All right. So that's pretty much it for your static pagination. There is really nothing else you need to do. The second you just click on use pagination, the system is automatically going to configure the pagination because we're dealing with static data, right? So we already know the total number of rows and we can just break it up and partition based on your pagination settings. So here, if I were to change this to 5, right now we have 9 pages and we're currently in page 2 because, well, we loaded this into page 2. All right. So I'm just going to, before I end this video, we're just going to go back into our table configuration and I'm going to just turn off the router effect. Where is it? Link pagination to route. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to go ahead and save this, delete this value. All right. So that's going to be it for this video. We've just gone over some static pagination. It's really that simple. All you just need to do is click on use pagination. Actually, you don't even need to do anything because by default, static pagination is set to true. All right. So that's it. See you in the next video where we go over server-side pagination. All right.